in envisioning a world where payments become truly invisible yet profoundly transformative. What is the topic? Invisible payments and its viability in India. Well, very curious to know more. We're glad that we have our eminent set of panelists. First up, for the moderator of the session, it's my honor to call upon the head technology, NPCI Bharat BillPay Limited, Sai Ganesh Vootukuri. Let's give Sai a warm round of applause. Come on, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Sai. You may choose your side wherever you'd like. Didn't intend to make it rhyming. The country head of digital and transaction banking, Yes Bank, Ajay Rajan. Let's give him a big round of applause. Chief Product and Innovation Officer, Protean, Bertram D'Souza. Mr. D'Souza, a warm round of applause. Chief Technology Officer, Paytm, Manmeet Dhody. Let's give Mr. Manmeet a warm round of applause. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Co-founder, Setu, Nikhil Kumar. Thank you, Nikhil. And Vice President, Consumer Platform and Payments, PhonePe, we've got Sonika, Chandra. So well, with that, Sai, we look forward to your curation forward. Over to you.
Hey, very good afternoon to everybody. I know it's after lunch. Invisible payments, it's a curious topic, very frankly, to me as well. To see how digital payments has burst into the Indian scene for last few years and how it's been adopted. So the next logical question was, what's next? So what's next in terms of how it's going to change the way consumers are going to interact for the payments? Or rather, with this topic, should we say non-interact, right? So that's how, to think that payments can happen in a non-interactive way, I personally feel could be the next big thing that could happen in payments. I think, the esteemed panel here to discuss further on it. Let me start with Nikhil. Very basic question I'm going to ask you, Nikhil. What is invisible payments?
I was going to say, if the organizers can put up my QR code and if the audience could pay, then we'll see how the money becomes invisible in their accounts and get to me. But I think, when we think about products and experiences, there's a unsaid thing amongst product designers that the best experience or best user experience is actually no user experience. So if you think about experiences that you have in life with digital products especially, the ones that you don't interact with, which work seamlessly, are the ones which are beautiful. Right? You're like, oh wow. Like, for example, your cable TVs, things like that, right? Things where you don't interact, your OTT and so on and so forth. It's always there, on, and so on. I think the opportunity and the way we are evolving is we're going to move from, consumer-led payments to payments almost becoming this idea of self-driving money is actually not too far. Why do I say that? Because if you look at where we are in the ecosystem of self-driving cars, as an example, this journey started 20, 30 years ago with GPS coming, with internet and Google Maps. And today we are living in a day where you can actually, in the US, we have robo-taxis and self-driving cars which are taking people around. And it's not going to be very far that we will see this happen for money as well. And fundamentally, why this is important from a consumer's perspective is in a country like India, I'm sure most people will agree, especially everyone who's a banker or a fintech building. People generally are not, I have a contrary opinion, people are actually very bad at managing money. Right? And they need help and support. It's not something that's taught at home. It's not something that's taught at schools. So people do need support to be held on how to manage their money. So this evolution of, enabling people into giving them ID, giving them bank accounts, getting them to transact digitally, to the next evolution that we're going to see is like, how are we going to help people effectively manage their money without having people involved in it? So, with infrastructure like UPI, AutoPay, and so on, we will be able to automate bill payments, we will be automate savings, we will be able to automate people's loan repayments, people's insurance premiums, and so on and so forth. And that's essentially one way to think about invisible payments is, can money become self-driving money, where money works for people, it gets allocated to the right places, right portfolios, and so on as we go along.
Just to jump to probably get a counter opinion about it. Bertram, do you want to add about it? Because I know you're working in a space where you're trying to change how commerce is done. So do you think it relates with, or it helps if the invisible payments comes in more adoption, with more adoption?
Thanks, Sai. So I think Nikhil articulated it really well. I think India is very uniquely positioned as a global leader in world payments. And it's not by chance, I think it's by design. A lot of what we've seen in the past of the zip-zap machine, of actually doing that and printing out a receipt to where we are today is a remarkable achievement for us all. And I think looking at some of the learnings of UPI and Aadhaar, which were built on the back of an open protocol, which allowed the ecosystem to innovate, and companies like PhonePe and Paytm actually build out what we have today as public infrastructure to do payments. I think we are looking at multiple new use cases to fuel the next 5 to 10 years. One of them would continue to be on the back of recurring payments. I think Nikhil touched upon that. So I think the payment ecosystem has matured to a point where authentication of an individual to be confident enough to create a mandate on their account to say that if you're getting a payment request from a X entity, this is a genuine request and you should honor that request. This is something which 10 years back, people would have never believed it possible. They would have said, no, if you go down that road, there'll be fraud, there'll be lots of problems. It's happening today. And in another 5 to 10 years from now, you look back, you'll see the volumes that are already being processed on things like FASTag for toll and transit. And what I'm working on, which is extremely exciting, is on ONDC, trying to create another ecosystem which is going to digitalize commerce, which is one step beyond invisible payments. So we're looking at not just invisible payments powering transactions, now we're also looking at interactions of commerce, which could be broken down to the smallest unit level of, for example, including an insurance automatically in a transaction that you do, or in a taxi or auto ride that you take. And some of these pieces are only possible when you break it down to its lowest unit, and when you build it on top of an open protocol. Those are a couple of the learnings which I've had. Happy to discuss in subsequent questions.
That's quite an interesting start, to say, something about how digital commerce is changing. And you spoke about auto financing, right? If I use the right term. And, it's definitely a new dimension that's bringing in. And I'm happy that, something like invisible payments is going to make this happen. Just to understand better, probably this is to Manmeet. Specifically in India, so what kind of use cases are already there with respect to invisible payments? When I spoke with people about invisible payments, people were not sure what it was, but then to my surprise, I understand a lot of us are actually using it. Probably do you want to demystify that?
Yeah, that's true. I think as Nikhil said, right, you really want to remove any effort from making a payment, any step. And that's basically what, in my opinion, invisible payments is all about. So if you look at it, we already do a ton of it already in the India ecosystem. In fact, I was surprised as I was trying to read about this as I was selected for this panel. All our subscription instruments, eNACH, SI on cards, wallet subscriptions, UPI AutoPay, right? So all of these, if you look at all of these linked to various use cases, FASTag is a very primary example, right? You just pass through and your payment happens. Your bill payments on subscriptions, your insurance premiums, your credit card bills, everything today is linked to invisible payments, in my opinion. I don't do anything to pay all of these things today, all these bills today. As I was thinking more about it today, though, and I was talking to some of my, colleagues, this term came up, a one-time mandate for everything. So, if you go beyond what we've achieved at scale in India, people have tried different things. You walk into a retail store, you pick up stuff, you walk out and you're done. There's no cashier, there's no nothing, there's no payment. you go from one country to the other, your insurance automatically stops in one, starts in the other. How do we try to aspire for something like that? Where, I go to a petrol pump, I fill up, for those of us still driving petrol or diesel cars, fill up the tank and, you have to pay a bill today. But how, you have to pay, through some mechanism, right? How do I just, fill up and get out of there? I go to any store, I pick up items and get out of there. I think that's what was exciting me as I was kind of pondering over this topic over the last 2 days. And should we aim for something like that? I know we're looking at it in bits and pieces. I know we're doing something about fuel and trying to get some pieces in place. But should we think a little bigger there? I think that's a question to ask, and that's something that I think will be fantastic if we can make that happen.
Hey, thanks, Manmeet. I mean, just to add on to what you said, so probably this is to Sonika. I mean, we are talking about what is invisible payments and what it can do, right? But I would want to understand, is there different categories in it? Can we categorize it? And more importantly, why do you think invisible payments is required? How do you, what is it in it for the merchants?
So I think in terms of categorization, really broadly, it will fall around the same buckets that I think all of us have been talking about, right? It's from a category perspective, you're doing bill payments, you're doing, topping up your wallets, you're doing auto payments. All of these are consumer use cases where we are saying that, hey, it makes it easy for the customer to do it. I think it centers everything on the experience. I think if you look at it from a point of view of what does it do in terms of enhancing a customer experience in terms of whatever interaction that person might be doing, right? If it's a if it's a monthly irritant for me to pay my bills, whether it's a water bill, electricity bill, etc., and I can set up a process for which it can be done automatically and I don't have to worry about it, I think taking worry out of the mind of the customer or the merchant, I think is what centers that experience, right? And I think we talked about product design, Nikhil was talking, right? Not having to have an interaction is the greatest experience, and that's how it is, right? If you can improve the experience in the life of the customer and ease it in a certain way, I think that's really what centers it. Similarly for the merchant, right? You talked about what does it do for the merchant. I think what's important for the merchant is that they're able to, from a commerce perspective, that you're able to get as many customers as are coming in, get them to move in the line quickly, or be able to process their payments fast, or not, and have don't have any failed payments. That's really what is critical for them, because that's what basically impacts them at the end of the day. And I think invisible payments really does that in a really nice way. Once you have set up your auto pay, then it's like fill it, shut it, forget it, right? And then the merchant also doesn't have to worry about it, right? They know that this customer is coming back. It's extreme stickiness. And that's what's really critical and it's extreme stickiness for the merchant, and it's extreme convenience for the customer. And I think both sides benefit from that.
I mean, if I were to take a cue from what you said, so there are two things coming out, right? One is probably the merchants don't have to worry about payments. He has to only worry about the business. And probably the other thing that is bringing us the stickiness as well. So once a customer comes in, probably he's getting used to this invisible payments, probably it makes him come again. So just probably, I'll take it to Nikhil. Invisible payments again, right? So I'm just taking it from the perspective of adoption, right? So how is it different, the technology required for this or the infrastructure required for this? How is it different from the existing conventional payments or even the modern payments like UPI?
Yeah, this is an interesting thing to ponder about. If you actually think about it from a technological perspective, there's actually not much that needs to be done. Let me get at it from another angle. I think one of the fascinating things that's happened in India because of UPI is that, you can think about, I'm just going to put this out as an idea, is you can think about UPI as one of the world's largest social network for payments, okay? And just take a step back and think about it. India is a low-trust society, right? And it is what it is, right? Even today, 60-70% of our e-commerce is done on COD. The way we had trust in any commerce or any transaction was through cash, because it was physical, you could see this. The fact that you can actually walk to a chai wala today and pay and that person hears a notification coming saying, "Aapko 12 rupiya aa gaya," and you can walk out, tells a lot about how far we have come as a society, right? Like, we've come so far that somebody is trusting a stranger and a strange box telling that, you've received 12 rupees in your bank account. The idea of like what digital payments has done is it's moved India from a low trust society to a high trust society because of all these reinforcements that's happening. Commerce is increasing, people are getting money, and so on and so forth. So in order for something like this to happen, like invisible payments, where you're basically giving this thing to someone else, the most fundamental bedrock is trust. And the good news is, all the wave one of work that we have done in UPI 1.0 has built that fundamental building block of trust, right? How many of you pay monthly bill payments here in the audience? How many of you miss the bill date always? Nobody misses bill date. Aise kaise? Like,
Because we send good reminders.
you send reminders. Like, if you... Okay, let me ask a different question. How many of you will set up a mandate on Paytm and PhonePe and trust them to pay your phone bill every month? Everybody, right? Almost everybody would do that, or like we'll eventually get to that. This shows that the fact that people trust the digital payment system and it's delivered to them on one set of use cases which we are in person, is just the sign. It's the tailwind that it shows that people will start trusting, the system to do more things for them. Like how I'm sure each of us, all of us have, I'm sure everybody is employed, so you all have to do tax savings. So everybody has a SIP running. You trust the system to debit your bank account and put money into a mutual fund today. The point is that this is now going to get trickled down to everybody else, people who couldn't do this before, people who don't need to do mutual funds for tax, people who might want to do 5 rupees insurance for making sure this family is healthy and safe every day, right? It could be that gig worker. It could be a gig worker who's just probably saving 50 rupees a day for his girl child's education in the future. It could be someone who's saving up to go do their next education and so on. So I think the fundamental bedrock of trust, the fundamental bedrock of infrastructure in the form of UPI, in the form of ecosystem of issuers, acquirers, TPAPs, this exists. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we will see the whole evolution of financial services, including lending. There is going to be no digital lending. Lots of people talk about this, right? You talk to any lender, they'll say lending is not about giving money, lending is really about collections, right? So if you really think about it, it's the ulta of like, someone's invisibly paying money back to the lender, right? So all of the next wave of digital financial services evolution in India will be built on top of this infrastructure of where customers will not interact, but customers would have delegated this responsibility to trusted parties, whether it's a bank, whether it's a TPAP, or whether it's a combination in the, in the form of Paytm, for example, for them to do this job effectively and bring value to their lives.
Interesting. So before I actually wanted to dwell more in technology, probably just wanted to take it up with Ajay. Ajay, being somebody from the bank domain, so I wanted to understand what is the take of the current banks today towards invisible payments? How do they see invisible payments? Do they see it as next big thing? Have they started working towards it, or it's already there for them?
So, so far as I recollect, and, in my almost 30 years of banking experience now, banks have been doing invisible payments since mid-90s. That's as much as probably, a lot of people in the room may not have been even born at that time. And, so people with a little more gray hair, etc., will recollect, they would have given SI mandates, ECS mandates, direct debit mandates. So, it is nothing but invisible payments, correct? So frictionless payments, as one would call it, embedded payments, as one would call it, invisible payments, as one would call it. So it is something which people have been used to for a long time. But Nikhil also touched upon a good point that this segment of people who are used to invisible payments would be a certain niche or a certain portion of the society, right? The chaiwala example that Nikhil gave is really where now India has come to, right? And a lot of credit goes to the two organizations, Paytm, PhonePe. You really have invented around UPI and given that next realm of how you can make invisible payments. Of course, form factors have changed. There is also FASTag, which is a huge success. We've seen how much operational financial efficiencies have got created because of FASTags. Banks and a lot of PPI issuers have also innovated around wearables. Though it still has not seen scale, but it's also a form factor which carries invisible payments. So that really wherever customer value or customer experience, and I think Sonika alluded to that, is really where banks or fintechs would innovate around use cases around this, right? So that's I think where I would see from a bank perspective. People are looking at invisible payments. Of course, it will be there to stay, but I still believe it will be very largely use case driven. There's just one more point, I think, and Nikhil also touched upon that point, is from a lending perspective, if you look at it, invisible payments actually is a very, very solid measure or metrics for someone to take a lending decision, because it gives actually a very good sense of the behavior or the nature of the counterparty, and it's actually a big plus that the person has actually a financial discipline, to around the way they've structured their financial behavior. So from a lending standpoint, because it's also use case driven, it has a flow around it. It's a big plus even from a credit assessment perspective.
I mean, again, just an interesting question came to me based on what Nikhil and you just said, right? So based
That's
on
out of syllabus,
right? Yeah. I mean, use probably to Bertram. So use invisible payments should be seen something that's can be built on top of the existing payment systems like UPI, because he touched upon UPI, he spoke about existing infrastructure, right? Is that true, or is invisible payments by itself going to be a payment method altogether?
No. It will always be on top of a payment rail. Like even I mentioned, some of the NACH or ECS mandates, that we spoke about, right? So these are all payment rails which already exist. What you do, and when you say invisible payments, it's actually a innovation which is built on top of a payment rail. So what you are doing is, so UPI is a product, right? It was common for everyone. What happened is, someone like a PhonePe, they picked up UPI as a use case, they innovated a full use case around it, and then that's what created the disruption that we saw today, right? So those it will always be on top of a use case, right? So CBDC, for example, and I spoke about it in the previous session as well. To me, CBDC could unleash the next level of innovation because it is token based, right? Now, any other form of digital money is account based. So the settlement happens always in batches. CBDC as an instrument, and it's a currency, it has stored value, right? So it is very different than digital money. So CBDC, the use cases around token transfers, instant settlement, zero cost with invisible payments actually can be absolutely disrupting, right? And that's really where the market will go in the future.
I just want to quickly add one point to adding to what Ajay was saying. I think in the old world, whoever set up mandates with electricity companies and so on, the payment infrastructure was super bundled with the merchant, right? So what I mean by this is you could go to the electricity company's website and set up a bank debit and say, hey, pay my electricity. A lot of us parents would have done this, and then and they would have automated payments and so on. But I think what's super interesting about something like UPI AutoPay is it unbundles the merchant from the infrastructure of AutoPay. So AutoPay is generic in nature. It doesn't say, hey boss, you can use AutoPay just for making electricity payments. So there is now an intermediary like a PhonePe or a Google Pay who is basically working for the customer, not for the merchant, and saying, hey customer, I'm now going to enable this infrastructure for you so that you can automate multiple merchant use cases, whether it's paying your credit card, whether it's paying your loan premium, whether it is doing SIP, whether it is paying Apple subscription, whether it is paying Hotstar, whether it's paying Netflix. So this great unbundling that's happened, because earlier this whole mandate infrastructure was designed in a way where it was merchant initiated. So you could only go where the merchant had. Now that this has been unbundled, now that there is an agent of customer in between, which is a PhonePe or a Paytm or a GPay, they are now basically coming in and saying, hey boss, I will unlock so many use cases for you, including as simple as IPO, which was like so crazy, right? If you think about it, we don't realize that we have the most advanced IPO infrastructure in the world, because you could sit at home and any customer who has a demat account who's UPI enabled can apply for a stock sitting at home. So this unbundling that's happened is why it's a big deal, and that unbundling couldn't have happened if we had not had an infrastructure like UPI. So I just wanted to add that point.
Totally democratized actually, right? So it's not, it's actually available for everyone at scale, and that's, I think, the point which...
I mean, you touched upon scale. So in India, everything is to do with scale, right? So maybe I'll start with you. So what do you think could be the challenges for invisible payments to scale in India? Yeah, so Ajay.
I think the biggest, at least purely from an invisible payment perspective, the biggest challenge which comes to mind is actually the issue of chargeback. Because, one can always have that fear of, someone contesting, कि ये तो मैंने नहीं किया, right? Especially when you do variables, for example, right? So that's, and there is, there needs to be a proper framework around how to deal with chargebacks, right? So NPCI did that, quite well, on their products. But, it's something as, more and more merchants, for example, if they put in invisible payments, that whole process, has to be as frictionless as, your payment process. So to me, that is probably one of the biggest challenge. The other challenge could be, again, it works very well depending on the use case. So it is not a one-size-fit-all that, jahan pe dekho, wahan invisible payments aap laga do, right? It doesn't work that way. So the use case has to be very clear for, some invisible payment or embedded payment to be put in. So ASBA, for example, is absolutely a ripe example. It is one of the biggest frictions for investing in an IPO was always, transfer the funds, get the acknowledgement, then, you're able to do lots of transit time, information, day getting lapsed, you miss the last day. As Indians, we typically would like to, save our investment till the last day. So all of that gets taken care with, something like an ASBA, right?
No, while you're talking about comfort, sorry to intervene, while you're talking about comfort, probably I'm just taking with Sonika. Yeah. So what is the balance between, I think this also comes with cost, right? How do you balance cost and comfort here?
So I think I'd like to answer that question a little differently, because I'll go back to the comment that was made on trust, right? Now that the consumers have a trust that is established in the UPI ecosystem, right? They know that if money is being sent from one place to the other, it'll get there. There's a certain timing to it. They trust the ecosystem. They know what it is. I think it all comes down to what is the customer experience. If you're solving a problem for them, if you're solving a real problem that a person is having today, I don't think the cost is a question of that, hey, will the customer pay for it, and is that a detriment to scale? I think is a wrong question at this point. Yeah. Because I think we have crossed that barrier of where, you have to walk into a supermarket and make people sample something for free to taste it. Yes, everybody has to do that. It happens across industries. Right? And that's what was done in payments as well. You were moving a population into digital payments and you needed them to try it for free, to understand how it works, to trust the system, to trust the players in the ecosystem, to trust everyone in it. Once that's there, then I think, and once people understand the convenience and the benefit and the value of it, then I don't think that's the question that should be asked for saying whether it will scale or not. Of course it will scale if you're solving a real problem, if you're giving the right experience, if the customer is able to trust you and the merchant gets the value, it will scale.
Okay. So while we talk about comfort, probably Manmeet, so what do you think is the risk factors here? So does this have the same risk as, say, a UPI payment, or is it different?
I think it has more. I think there are two factors here primarily. I think the first is that, you know, I'll start maybe from the back end of this. How does the customer know what is he spending? You've set up these mandates in different places, different apps, different banks, all of this. There's no single place for a customer to see as to where is everything set up, right? We do send SMSs today 24 hours in advance, etc., but really there's no single place. I think, do we need an account aggregator of sorts for making sure a customer can see everything in one place? I think that's one. The second is, in order to minimize risk, right, or fraud here, every customer must be treated differently. What are the limits on transactions, the transaction amount? Everything should be governed, needs to be governed by a trust score, a customer trust score. You have to establish that. And if you don't establish that, you run into the, a realm of, frauds happening, chargebacks coming in, as Ajay said, and then you don't know what to do. So I think that having that limit framework in place, a customer score in place, I think is the second point I wanted to make. Third, I'll keep it brief, I know we're almost out of time. In making scaling this, right, while we said this technology is not required, I mean, we have the payment technology in place, which I agree with, but there are two aspects. First is establishing identity of the person who's making this payment. That's one. And second is, what is he buying? I think as we try to solve some of these problems, that's where the challenges will come. We've tried to use biometrics. You can fool biometrics today. You use ML and AI, it's not a perfect science. So I think that's where the challenges will be. That's where the mistakes may happen as we scale this infrastructure, and that's why we've got to be careful. I think I'll just keep it to that for now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are almost run out of time, but I would like probably Bertram to maybe give the final comments. Maybe you can have 30 seconds to maybe to say what is, how do you see invisible payments 3 years down the line?
Thanks. I think just to summarize in the interest of time, what everyone over here has said is that invisible payments is here and now. It's not something which will come in 5 years. We're already experiencing it today in our daily lives. Two is the way in which invisible payments, which is happening. I like the point that Nikhil talked about on unbundling and trust. I think we have definitely leapfrogged in the last 5 years on the back of what is possible with some of the new tech like UPI and BBPS. It has enabled us to do what we never thought was possible. It has also enabled third-party entities who are not holders of your actual money in the bank, like a Paytm, PhonePe, and so on, to actually have ability to debit your account on your behalf with the right identity and authentication. So I think that's something which is actually completely new and ahead of its time for many markets. We are probably the only global market who's doing something on these lines. And to touch upon what Ajay spoke about, I think NACH and eNACH and some of those older systems has gone into a complete new shape and form under some of the new tech stacks like UPI. So without kind of subsuming some of the old use cases, the new use cases have actually led to a further fillip of commerce. And I think we keep looking forward to new technologies. I did speak about ONDC and the way the settlement network also operates in ONDC, but I think we won't have much time to cover that on this panel, but happy to talk to all of you offline. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
It's been there for 20 odd years earlier. It will be there in the future. Form factors will change. Innovation like CBDC will completely transform it. I'm telling you, next year will come, we'll probably say the same thing.
We'll talk more about
after
this.
20 years.
Sure. So
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
The conversations can continue, ladies and gentlemen. One final word. Sai, you were saying something. Did I cut you anywhere?
No, thanks a lot. I think it was great. It was a great conversation with you folks. I think a lot of things has come out of maybe demystifying the invisible payments. Maybe we are already using it, and I think there's a lot of potential still to be tapped. Thanks a lot.